Hey guys, my name is Em and welcome back to my channel. So in today's video I am going to be giving you my top 22 books that I read in 2022. It was extremely difficult to try and choose books for this list because even though I read a lot of books, it was really hard to like think back to which books and like rank them and see which I preferred over what. And this year I read the most that I've read in any other year. I've so far read 121 books. I'm sure I will finish like maybe one or two more before the new year, but currently I've read 121 books, and trying to come up with like 22 out of that I just like adored more than anything was actually quite difficult. And what I really noticed about this year is that I read a lot of like novellas and graphic novels and poetry collections and things like that just to finish another book and just to like have another number on Goodreads, and that's not really something that I want to do next year because I didn't really enjoy those books. Like I'm thinking back on like those, you know, short Kindle Unlimited like poetry collections that I read, and I don't remember a single thing from any of them. I didn't really enjoy my read of them and I don't really have an opinion on them, nor do I remember them too well. So I'm definitely going to try and focus on reading for quality rather than quantity for next year. But that being said, I read some absolutely phenomenal books this year and I've found new all-time favorites. So I'm going to get into this list. I decided to do 22 because, you know, it's 2022, but only the first 10 are like ranked in order of preference. So my top 10 books are like in order of preference, but the rest of the books are just like other favorites that I've had throughout this year. It was too hard for me to rank from 10 to 22 because I loved them all kind of equally. But yeah, without further ado, let's get into the top 22 books of 2022. Okay, so up first, my absolute favorite read of 2022 that honestly, when I read this book, I just knew it was going to be the favorite. I read it at the very beginning of the year, and as soon as I finished it, I just knew that it was going to be not only just a favorite of this year, but just of all time. And if you have been around for most of this year, I'm sure you will already know because I talked about it a lot. But my number one read of 2022 was A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. I truly have never read a book like this before. I'm not going to be going into too much detail about each of these books just because there are so many of them, but I have read all of these throughout the year in different vlogs and I'm sure they're in the thumbnails, so if you do want to see like my full opinions on them, you can go back to those vlogs. This is a YA thriller, and I feel like with YA thrillers it can honestly be hit or miss because they're not always amazing, but I have to say that this one was just the best thriller that I've ever read, the best YA book that I've ever read, the best book that I've ever read. Like after The Nightingale, which is like my all-time favorite book ever, this is my favorite book. Like I just loved it so much. Pip and Ravi have my entire heart and soul, and I love them so much, and this is going to be made into a TV series for BBC and I'm so excited for that. You have no idea. I'm so excited. So yeah, this was without a doubt going to be my favorite read of 2022. Then at number 2 we have As Good as Dead by Holly Jackson, which is the sequel to A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. The fact that like this series took up the top 2 spots of my favorite reads of this year is just insane. It was just amazing. Sometimes the sequels are not as good as the first books. That did not happen with this trilogy. Like this book was just as good as the first one. I just loved it so much. Again, Pip and Ravi are just iconic. They are a power couple. They are just like the best characters that I read about in a very long time. Pip Fitz-Amobi is just such an icon and she is so intelligent and I just loved reading about it, and like the mystery really kept you going. Like you didn't predict what was going to happen. It was not obvious, and when you thought that you knew the plot twist and that the plot twist had been revealed, there was another twist and another twist and another twist. It was just absolutely phenomenal, and I think if you've not read this series, you just have to. Then coming in at number 3 is one that is quite random. I'd never heard of this series before this year, and then it turned out to be one of my favorites. So that is the Mindfuck series by St. Abbey. This is technically 5 books, but because it is like in the one book and anthology, I'm just counting it as one book. Otherwise this would take up the next 5 favorite spots because I just loved it so much. This series had a lot of hype at the beginning of this year when I read it. I saw it on TikTok, and you know, TikTok again can be hit or miss for book recs, but it was so spot on with this one. Like I have never ran to Kindle Unlimited as fast as I did when I saw what this book was about. I will briefly describe what this series is about for you just in case you haven't read it. So this book follows Logan, who is an FBI agent who is currently tracking down this serial killer that is going around killing all of these men. He's looking for like a 6-foot big build man that is doing all of these killings, and then he starts dating this new girl Lana, and Lana Myers, I love her so much. Basically Lana is the one doing these killings, and it is just the most iconic series that I've ever read. It is so good. The books are all like about 100 pages each, so they're not long at all, and they're just so good. Like, the vibes in this series are unmatched. It is very graphic and there are a lot of trigger warnings, so I would look those up before you go into this series. But yeah, this just had to be my number 3 read of 2022. And then at number 4 we have House of Sky and Breath by Sarah J Maas. Honestly, it's kind of crazy to me that this book even came out this year. It feels like it has been out for like at least 2 years, but I absolutely love this book, and just the hype and the atmosphere around social media when a Sarah J Maas book comes out is just unmatched, because everyone is reading it, everyone's buying it, and everyone's like discussing theories. The ending of this book just absolutely blew my mind and made me so excited for the future books in this series. I just absolutely loved it so much. Then for my 5th favorite book of the year, I actually have 2 books because it's a duology. We have These Violent Delights and Our Violent Ends. I'm putting both of these at number 5 because I actually haven't finished this book yet, so I don't think I can put it at number 5 because I don't know how it's going to end. But like, this duology is just phenomenal. Like, it is so good. This is a Romeo and Juliet retelling set in 1920s Shanghai when there's like a monster lurking about killing people, and it is so good. This is the best enemies to lovers that I've ever read. The writing in this is phenomenal, particularly the writing in Our Violent Ends is just beautiful and so poetic, and I literally find myself wanting to annotate like literally every single sentence because it is that good. I just love them both so much. So yeah, this just had to be my 5th favorite. Then at number 6 we have The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. I buddy read this book with Sophia earlier in the year, and it was genuinely one of the best fantasy books that I've ever read and the most raw and brutal books that I've ever read. It's very history heavy, so if you are interested in history, particularly like history in China, this is definitely a book that you should read. Yes, it is very brutal, but it is told so wonderfully, and her writing is just absolutely phenomenal. It's crazy how much I loved this book, and I love that it's like rooted in real history when you're finding out things that you didn't know before. And when I was reading this, like, I was learning all about this part in history that I had no idea about, while also getting this wonderful fantasy story with these amazing characters that you just fall in love with, even though they're all very morally grey. And I think that this is just genuinely one of the best fantasy series out there. I still have to read The Burning God, which is the 3rd and final one, because I'm terrified to read that because I know it's going to be brutal, I know it's going to hurt, and I don't want this series to be over, but I'm gonna have to bite the bullet eventually and finish that one. Then my 7th favorite book of the year was The Confidence of Wildflowers by Macaulay Smeltzer. This book and this duology honestly feels like a bit of a fever dream because it's so out there, it's so crazy, but I just remember loving it so much. I think I read this book and the second book as well in like less than a day each, and they're like 500-page books as well. This is a romance book. I can't really even describe what it's about, but it's like an age gap romance, and there's a lot of sad topics in here. Definitely check trigger warnings, but I don't even know what it is about this duology that makes me love it so much, but I just love it so much. It's definitely not going to be for everyone. I made a few of my friends read it and they did not like it, but this was genuinely one of my favorite romance books ever, and especially of this year. Then at number 8 we have Magnolia Parks by Jessa Hastings. I was completely blown away by this book, and I didn't expect to be. I was looking at this book on TikTok and online for like a couple months before I read it. I read it back in August. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was a children's book because it reminds me very much so of, like, you know, those Enid Blyton books that are like The Magic Faraway Tree? It looks like those. So I didn't pick it up. I didn't think anything of it. Then I started seeing like more hype about it, and I kind of read into it what it's about, and what really sold me was that people were saying that it is like Gossip Girl but set in like rich elitist London. It is chaotic, it is messy, it is toxic, but it is so amazing and addicting, and I just love it so much. Magnolia and BJ are just such flawed people and so bad for each other, but like they just keep coming back to each other, and it's just so good. I can't even really describe what this is about, but I'm sure you've heard about it by now because everyone is talking about it, but it is just so good. It was an unexpected favorite. Then my 9th favorite book of the year was Twisted Lies by Anna Wong. Again, this was such an unexpected favorite because I read the first book in the series, Twisted Love. I hated it so much. I gave it like a 1 or a 2 star. Then I read the second one and I gave it 5 stars. I skipped the third one because I just could not stand the main guy, and then I decided to give this one a go because I saw it in the bookshop and I was like, okay, I'm gonna read it, I'm gonna see what it's like, and it ended up being one of my favorite books of the year, and I just loved it so much. Needless to say, it was a 5 star. This book was just absolutely phenomenal. The tropes in here are amazing. The way that it's written is just so good, and I was just so so intrigued and captivated the whole way, because there was also like a plot going on as well as the romance. There was like a stalker kind of a plot going on, which just kept me so intrigued, because you're like trying to figure that out and then you're getting like romance as well. It was amazing. It was so good. Then moving on to number 10, and that has to be The Summer Turned Pretty by Jenny Han. I read this entire trilogy in 24 hours during the summer. I did a whole vlog on it. I will try to link it down below, but I read this entire trilogy in 24 hours and I just loved it so much. It just gives the perfect summer vibes. It's one of these books that's like, it's not like perfect, but it is just got such good vibes, and I thoroughly enjoyed my time reading this. So yeah, this just had to be my number 10 book of the year. So yeah, that is my top 10 books of the year ranked from 1 to 10 in order of preference. Now I'm going to just get on to the other ones from 11 to 22. I'm going to go fairly quickly through these because this video is going to be really long if I spend much time talking about them. These ones are not necessarily in any particular order, but like also they're like in a bit of an order. So yeah, let's get into the other favorite books of the year. Okay, so next up we have Throttled by Lauren Asher. This was one that actually took me by surprise because this is a Formula 1 racing book, and I have no interest in Formula 1. I had no knowledge of Formula 1, so I was like, maybe I won't like this. Also, please ignore that this is the cover with the man on it. Bad decision was made. Wouldn't make the same one again, but you know, it is what it is. But I read this book and I really loved it, and I think what added to the love of this book is that I actually have such a good memory of when I was reading it. I was reading it in like mid-July, and mid-July is like my favorite time of the year, and I read this book overnight when I was at work. I ended up getting stuck at work until like 4 a.m. and I read this entire thing, and it was just the best vibes. But that's not even about the book. The book itself was really good as well. I loved the plot, I loved the characters. I haven't yet continued with the rest of the series, but I will do so. I do own the second one. I still don't necessarily have much of an interest in Formula 1 racing, but I did enjoy reading about it when I was reading this book. Next up we have As Good as Dead by Holly Jackson. This is the third and final book in the Good Girl's Guide to Murder trilogy. The reason that this wasn't as high up is because I didn't love it as much as I loved the first two. It was still good. I did still give it 5 stars, but it went in a direction that I didn't particularly love. And the first half of the book is actually what the plot of the book is about, and then the second half of the book is about something completely different. And what I really didn't like is that some of the actions in this book were completely out of character for our main characters, which I really don't like when they do that. Like through the first 2 books, Pip was just such an amazing, intelligent person, and she was coming up with all of these amazing things. And then in this one, I'm not saying she was stupid, but she definitely made some stupid decisions that she would not have made in the first 2 books, and that took away from my enjoyment just a little bit, because I was like, this is unrealistic. And what I loved about the first 2 was that they were so well thought out and so like realistic, even though they weren't realistic, but like theoretically like they could have been. So yeah, this was just not as good as the other 2 in the series, but I did still love it, and I do still have like a huge love for this series. Then next up we have The Dragon Republic by R.F. Kuang. This is the sequel to The Poppy War. I absolutely loved this book as well. I did buddy read it with Sophia. We read it at the same time. We cried about it. We ranted about it. It was just absolutely phenomenal. Would highly recommend. Obviously I can't really say too much about this book because it is the sequel and I don't want to spoil anything, but as you can see from all my annotations, emotions were felt, feelings were felt, and it was just an amazing book. I loved it so much. Then next up we have a book that I read on my Kindle, which was Mr. Wrong Number by Lynn Painter. I loved this book so much. It's just a fun little rom-com. It was my first Lynn Painter book to read, but I absolutely loved this one. I stayed up again all night reading it. I read it in like 1 or 2 sittings, and I feel like when I have like a memory attached to a book, I love it even more. Then next up we have Verity by Colleen Hoover. I've read a good few Colleen Hoover books now, and I have loved most of them. Some of them are better than others. A lot of them are red flags, but I still read them and like them nonetheless. Verity though stands out to me massively because it's nothing like Colleen Hoover's other books, and I think that it really worked. This is a thriller book, and I was not expecting to love a thriller written by a romance author, because sometimes when authors try to swap genres it doesn't always work out, because you're expecting the books to be like their previous books and it's not, and you just don't end up liking them as much. With this one it was just amazing. I read this in literally 3.5 hours. Like I just could not put it down. It was so twisty, it was so creepy, it was so disturbing. This book was disturbing. That's the one word that I would use to describe it. It is disturbing, and there's kind of like an ambiguous ending whether you're team letter or team manuscript. Honestly, I could be convinced either way. I want to be team letter just for like the drama, and I think it makes the ending more suspicious and more like suspenseful if I'm team letter, but like also I feel like there's too much evidence behind team manuscript for it to be team letter, but I could be convinced either way with a good argument. Then the next one is one that I listened to as an audiobook, and that was Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren. This book was just absolutely phenomenal. Usually I don't get the full enjoyment out of a book that I read on audiobook because I'm like doing other things while I'm listening to to it, and I don't know why, but I just kind of like don't get the full enjoyment. With this book, I was literally floored. Like I literally read this entire thing in like 2 days, I think, which is very unusual for me for an audiobook, but I just love this book so much. It was a very emotional book. It was amazing. It had like that past present timeline where we're getting to see like them fall in love, and then present day we're getting to kind of discover why they fell out of love. That's just one of the most painful tropes, but like so good, and I literally have read it in so many different formats through different books, and I love every single one of them. Again, this is a book that I would love to reread physically because I feel like I missed out on like a good few quotes. I was completely blown away by this, honestly, because I've read a couple other Christina Laurens and I didn't like absolutely adore them, so this was very much so an unexpected favourite, and it definitely lives up to the hype. Next up we have Stolen Heir by Sophie Lark, which is the second book in the Brutal Birthright series. I don't actually own the paperback for Stolen Heir, but I do own the paperback for Brutal Prince, so I'm just going to hold this up. But I preferred the second book, which is Stolen Heir. This series in general is so good and so much fun. It's a mafia romance series that follows like these two families who they always hated each other, and then they're joined together when the couple in this book get married. And then Stolen Heir follows Nessa, and she is kidnapped by like this rival gang leader. He holds her captive, but like he takes such good care of her and he loves her so much, and they fall in love, which is so toxic, and in real life that is not okay, but like in a mafia romance book it is the most romantic shit I've ever read, and I loved it so much. Okay, then next up we have The Infinity Between Us by N.S. Perkins. What really convinced me to pick it up, other than the absolutely fabulous cover, is the fact that it was pitched as a mix between The Summer I Turned Pretty and Love in Other Words, both of which I absolutely loved and adored. So I decided to pick this book up, and it was so good. Again, I have such a good memory of reading this book because I read it on like the hottest day of the year. I was sitting in my garden the whole time, like on my egg chair. I don't know if you guys remember the egg chair from the summer, but I was sitting on that and I read this entire book in one day. There's a couple of things that I don't remember about this book because it does kind of have like a very similar plot to a couple other books, so I do kind of get them mixed up in my head. However, when I read this, I do remember loving absolutely everything about it, and it was very hard hitting at the end. So yeah, this was just absolutely amazing, perfect summer vibes, and it's like that beach house summer kind of book. Okay, so the next one that I'm going to talk about is another ebook, and that was Colorblind, I believe by Sierra Madley or Madeley or something like that. It was so good. One thing I will say is it wasn't exactly written very well. Like I wouldn't say that like the book in itself is like the best book I've ever read. However, my enjoyment levels for it were amazing, and the plot and the story kept me going through like the not so great writing. This book is a sapphic romance, which love to see it, and it basically follows this girl who has the ability that when she looks at people she can see the age that they die, and then she meets this girl one day and the number on her head is 16, and she has just turned 16. So our main character knows that she has less than a year to live, and she knows that she should stay away from her, she should just like separate herself, but they can't help but kind of like, you know, keep finding their way back to each other. And it's very heartbreaking because you're reading this and you're like knowing that they're on borrowed time, but only one of them knows that they're on borrowed time, and you can kind of see how that like impacts how they get to know each other and how they get together and stuff. I really liked the plot of this. I liked the characters. I was rooting for them so much. They were so cute, and I really liked how it wrapped up as well. So yeah, I loved this book so much. We're down to the final three, guys. So the next one that I'm going to talk about is Zodiac Academy. This is the third book, but I'm specifically talking about like the first book. I just really liked this. It was, again, it's kind of one of those series that's like a little bit of good bad. Like it's not like the best written thing in the world, it's not like got this solid magic system or anything like that, but it's really, really enjoyable. There's so many different like magic creatures and magical beings and stuff, and it's just really entertaining, and I really wanted to finish this series in 2023. Okay, we're down to the final two. So next up we have Lily's Promise by Lily Ebert. This was actually, I believe, my first read of 2022, and I think this was actually my only historical fiction read of the year. I could be wrong about that, but I didn't read as many historical fictions this year as I do other years. This was Lily's life story throughout World War II and the absolute hardships that she had to go through. It was so interesting to read about and harrowing to read about, and I just think that it's so amazing to read about. And also the fact that Lily is still, you know, around to tell the tale at like 98 or 99 years old. Like I think that that's just wonderful. I do want to read more historical fiction books next year because I really, really do love reading them. It's one of my favorite genres, but I feel like because they're not as commonly like in the media or like talked about on booktube and stuff, I often don't read them. I sometimes end up reading hyped books instead, but that is definitely one of my goals for 2023, to read more historical fiction books because I just love them, and I love reading about people's life stories that have gone through experiences that I would know nothing about. And yeah, this book was just truly inspirational and I would highly recommend. And then finally, last but not least, we have Marriage for One by Ella Mays. It was so good. Like I didn't expect to love it as much. This is a marriage of convenience book, and our main characters are named named Rose and Jack. So there's a couple Titanic references in there, not an annoying amount, but like there are a couple of Titanic references in there. And this book was just so good. I was not expecting to love it as much as I did. Again, this is the cover with the man on it. There is like a nice cute cartoon cover available now. It had all of the elements of a Marriage of Convenience book that you would have wanted. It's grumpy sunshine. It had like the nursing back to health trope. It also had the trope of like he's so grumpy to everybody but he was always so kind and so soft to her. It was one of the most amazing standalone romance books that I've ever read, and I'm very, very excited to read more from Ella Mays because I have a feeling that all of her other books are going to be just as amazing. So that is it, guys. That is my top 22 books of 2022. It was an amazing reading year and it was an amazing year. I made so many memories, from meeting some of my best friends to reading 121 amazing books and getting to share them with you and getting to meet so many new people on here. Just thank you all so much for watching my videos throughout the year, and thank you for sticking around into the new year if you do. I'm really, really excited to see what amazing books and new stories and new worlds 2023 has in store, and I'm really excited to make some new amazing memories in 2023 and see where this channel goes. And yeah, I'm just so grateful for every single one of you that watches these videos and comments and likes and messages me on Instagram. Like, I see them all, I love them, and thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. If you've read any books because of me this year, definitely let me know down in the comments. That honestly is one of the best compliments that anybody could give me, is that like, oh, I read this book because of you and I loved it, and that is just so amazing. I love you all so much. Thank you so much for watching, and Happy New Year.